Violet, lovely name. Bo Miller offered his hand, a stranger's smile on his face while Brenda gushed beside him. My first love, the man who'd splintered my college heart, now stood before me, holding my best friend's hand, pretending we'd never met. My breath hitched, the restaurant spinning. His eyes, once so familiar, held only a cold, practiced charm. The hostess led us to the table we'd reserved at Bella, a nice enough spot just off Main Street, known for its predictable pasta and quiet atmosphere. Ethan Jensen pulled out my chair, a familiar gesture that settled something inside me. We were early as always. It gave us a moment to talk, to breathe, before the others arrived. My husband, solid and steady, adjusted his cuff, then looked up as the restaurant door chimed. Brenda Hayes came in first, her bright scarf a splash of color against the subdued lighting. She was practically bouncing, her smile wide and ready. Trailing a step behind her, a hand resting lightly on the small of her back, was a man. He moved with a kind of casual confidence that snagged my attention before I even registered his face. Then Brenda was there, pulling out a chair, her voice a little too loud in the quiet room. "Clara, Ethan, this is Bo," she chirped, beaming at the man beside her. "Bo Miller, he's absolutely wonderful." The name hit me first, a weird cold twist in my gut. Then his eyes met mine. 6 years older, yes, but unmistakable. The same sharp line of his jaw, the slight curl at the corner of his lips when he was trying to charm. My first love. The one who had carved a jagged hole through my college years, leaving me raw and convinced of my own brokenness. He was standing right there, holding my best friend's hand, a small, intimate gesture I hadn't missed. My breath hitched, a knot forming in my throat. Bo's eyes, a familiar shade of hazel, widened for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something. Recognition, surprise, maybe even a ghost of regret. Then it was gone, smoothed over by that practiced charm, a mask he wore well. He stepped forward, extending a hand to Ethan first. "Good to meet you, Ethan." His voice was deeper than I remembered, richer. He shook Ethan's hand firmly, then turned to me, his gaze sweeping over my face as if seeing me for the very first time. He offered his hand, a polite, distant gesture. Violet, lovely name. My mind raced, trying to find a response, a flicker of something to confirm that this was some kind of elaborate joke. But his face remained carefully blank, that pleasant, stranger smile fixed in place. Ethan's hand found my lower back, warm and reassuring. He squeezed gently, his voice a quiet murmur next to my ear. "Everything okay, Clara?" I managed a choked, "Fine," the word catching. My hand went for the water glass, the cold condensation feeling good against my shaking fingers. The air in the room suddenly felt too thick, too hot, pressing in on me. I took a long swallow, the ice water doing little to cool the sudden heat rising in my cheeks. Dinner became a long, strange play. Brenda babbled happily about Bo, his work in historical preservation, his wit, his kindness. She was utterly, wonderfully oblivious, a fact that made the whole scene feel even more surreal. Bo, for his part, played along, laughing at her jokes, asking Ethan about his work in engineering. He was effortlessly charming, the kind of man who could make anyone feel at ease, if they didn't know the dark currents beneath. Every so often, his gaze would slide to me, quick and sharp, then away, leaving a lingering chill. He was talking about a town council meeting, discussing the fate of an old municipal building. "It's about preserving the past, you know," he said, his voice thoughtful. Then his eyes almost imperceptibly found mine across the table. "Some things are worth preserving. Wouldn't you agree, Violet?" My fingers tightened on my fork, the metal digging into my palm. The urge to lash out was sudden and strong. "And some things," I said, my voice flatter than I intended, "are better demolished entirely." Ethan's eyebrows went up a notch, a silent question in his gaze. But he said nothing, just continued to cut his chicken. Bo merely smiled, a slight, knowing curve of his lips. Later, as we stood by the coat check waiting for our turns, Bo moved closer. Brenda was a few feet away, laughing with Ethan. Bo's breath was warm against my ear, a ghost of a familiar scent. "Small world, isn't it?" he murmured, his voice low, intimate. "Look forward to seeing more of you." Then that smirk, the one that always made my stomach clench, and he was gone, moving back to Brenda, placing a hand on her arm. The drive home was heavy, the silence thick with the unspoken. Rain had started, a steady patter against the windshield, blurring the streetlights. Ethan reached over, taking my hand. "You seemed a little off tonight, honey," he said, his voice gentle. "Long day?" I lied. "Just tired," I mumbled, pulling my hand away to adjust the heater, though I wasn't cold. I watched the rain streak across the glass, my anger a simmering, nameless thing just beneath my skin. Later in bed, sleep wouldn't come. My mind, a frantic, unwilling projector, replayed scenes. Beau's smile, the way his hand had felt in mine, the easy laughter we used to share. And then the cold goodbye, the quiet way he had simply walked away, leaving me to pick up the pieces. I turned over, punched my pillow, but the memories persisted, sharp and unwelcome. Ethan slipped in beside me, his warmth of familiar comfort against my back. He draped an arm over me, pulling me closer. "Love you," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. I squeezed my eyes shut, pretending to be asleep, the word love feeling like a heavy, sour taste in my mouth. Guilt, unexpected and unwelcome, settled over me. Brenda's text came the next morning as I was making coffee. "He's just divine, isn't he? We should totally do a double date next weekend. So much fun." I stared at the bright screen, at her joyful emojis, and without thinking, hurled my phone across the kitchen. It skittered across the linoleum, coming to rest with a dull thud against the baseboard. Over the next few weeks, the tension within me festered. I snapped at Ethan over misplaced keys, pulled away from Brenda's excited phone calls, always finding an excuse. There was a dangerous, restless stirring inside me, a feeling I hadn't known since college. It was anger, yes, but something else too, something I couldn't quite name, that hummed under my skin, waiting. The weeks that followed the dinner at Bella stretched thin, each day pulling a little tighter. My temper, usually a controlled thing, frayed at the edges. A misplaced bill, a slightly too loud TV, a late return from Ethan's office, all became reasons for a sharp word, a surmouth, a withdrawal into silence. Ethan, patient and observant, noticed. One evening, after a particularly pointed comment about him leaving his coffee mug by the sink, he simply put down his newspaper. "Clara," he said, his voice level, "is there something I did wrong?" I turned away from the window, the city lights blurring outside. A tired sigh escaped me. "No," I said, rubbing my temples. "It's not you. I'm just going through something." It was a flimsy excuse when I hoped he'd accept. He rose from the armchair, walked over and reached for my hand. His fingers were warm, steady. "Whatever it is," he said, looking directly into my eyes, "we'll figure it out together." His concern was genuine, his love calm and unwavering. And it was precisely that unwavering calm that made me pull my hand away. I couldn't tell him that his measured love, his predictable goodness, suddenly felt like a cage. Not when I remember the reckless, unpredictable cage that Beau had always embodied. A few days later, a sharp rap on the front door interrupted my afternoon quiet. It was Brenda, her bright hair a little windblown, her face etched with a concern that deepened the lines around her eyes. She clutched a brightly patterned tote bag. "What's going on with you, Clara?" she asked, stepping inside before I could fully open the door. Her voice was softer than usual, but firm. "You've been dodging me. I've called, I've texted. It's not like you." I mumbled something about being busy, turning to put on the kettle. Brenda followed me into the kitchen, her eyes never leaving me. We talked about inconsequential things for a moment, the weather, a new shop downtown, until she took a deep breath. "Look," she said, her voice dropping, "Beau asked me about you. He thinks you don't like him. You hate him, don't you?" My hand, holding the steaming kettle, froze. I nearly dropped it, the hot water sloshing precariously. "What?" I managed, setting it down with a clatter. "Why would he think that?" Brenda shrugged, her expression confused. "He said you were cold, distant, and then that comment about demolishing things. He said he just got a weird vibe." For a split second, I considered it, considered telling her everything about the college years, the dizzying heights, the crushing fall. The way he'd left me without a word vanished into thin air. The heartbreak that had taken years to scab over. The words were right there, forming on my tongue, but then I swallowed them, the familiar bitterness rising. No, I lied, looking away, staring at the condensation on the window. I just, I just get an off vibe sometimes. You know how it is. Brenda's face softened, a sigh escaping her lips. She reached out, placing a gentle hand on my arm. Clara, she said, her voice earnest, he's special. Truly. I know it's fast, but I think he might be the one. The words hit me like a physical punch. The phrase echoed, mocking in my head. I forced a weak smile, but inside I felt a familiar dread bloom. After Brenda left, the quiet of the house felt suffocating. I drifted to the living room, my laptop open on the coffee table. My fingers, almost on their own, typed his name, Beau Miller. I scrolled through old social media profiles, then newer ones. Photos, articles, his life, neatly curated online. Then I saw them. Photos of Beau and Brenda, smiling, laughing, clinking glasses. 2 months ago, 3 months ago, barely more than a flicker in time. He hadn't just met her. He'd been with her for months. My jaw tightened. With a frustrated grunt, I slammed the lid shut. That evening, Ethan suggested we invite Brenda and Beau over for dinner. A way to mend fences, he said. You've been so distant with Brenda lately, he commented, not unkindly. Maybe a relaxed evening here would help. To his surprise and my own, I heard myself say, with almost too much enthusiasm, yes, let's have them over this weekend. That's a great idea. A new, dangerous thought had taken root. The next morning, with Ethan at work, I composed a discreet message to Beau, using the number Brenda had once given me in passing. Beau, Clara here, thinking it might be good to talk before Friday's dinner. Clear the air? Let me know. It felt calculated, cold, but I sent it. He responded quickly, suggesting a coffee shop just outside of town, a place we both knew was rarely busy. I arrived first, chose a booth in the corner. When he walked in, dressed in a casual jacket, a small smile playing on his lips, it was like no time had passed. Violet, he said, sliding into the opposite seat, the name feeling like an intentional barb. Always punctual. I ignored the bait. Beau, I began, my voice low. What are you doing with Brenda? I wanted to warn him off, demand answers for our past, for the way he'd ghosted me, for the casual cruelty of his appearance now. He leaned back, his gaze unreadable. What does it look like, Clara? I'm with Brenda. He took a slow sip of his coffee. You always liked walking the line, didn't you, Clara? His words were smooth, a challenge, hinting at the old thrill we had once shared, the dangerous chemistry that had always crackled between us. The confrontation unraveled. My resolve to protect Brenda dissolving in the face of his familiar charm, his knowing eyes. That old pull, a dangerous, intoxicating current I thought I'd buried, surged back to the surface. He smiled then, a slow, predatory curve of his lips. Maybe we should catch up properly, sometime soon. The suggestion hung in the air, a forbidden invitation, hot and undeniable. I returned home, my head swimming. My noble plan to protect Brenda had been hijacked, twisted into something else entirely. A new treacherous path began to form in my mind, one I knew it I should resist, but found myself drawn to with a disturbing magnetic force. The dinner party itself was a carefully orchestrated performance. Ethan, jovial, Brenda, effusive, Beau, effortlessly charming, and me, playing the part of the good wife, the good friend, the generous hostess. On the surface, it was a pleasant evening. But for Clara and Beau, amidst the clinking of glasses and polite conversation, there was a silent agreement, an unspoken understanding of what was to come. The first few secret meetings felt innocent enough. Coffee at the independent place downtown, away from the usual spots. We talked about college, about the places we used to go, the friends we had shared. Closure, I told myself, a necessary step to understand the past, to put it finally to rest. Beau was easy, charming. He listened, his eyes holding mine a little longer than strictly necessary. But closure quickly deepened. Stolen lunches, quick and nervous, in quiet diners where no one knew us. Texts late at night after Ethan was asleep, the screen glowing hot in my hands, a jolt of illicit excitement coursing through me. Then out-of-the-way bars with dim lighting and sticky tables where his hand might brush mine, lingering for a second too long. I felt alive again, a rush of excitement that had been absent for years, a sharp, vital spark. I convinced myself it wasn't an affair. Not really, just a connection, a deep, long-buried understanding with someone who truly saw me. The lies started small, then grew like weeds. Long hours at the gallery, I'd tell Ethan, explaining why I was late getting home, my hair still smelling faintly of Beau's cologne. Helping Brenda with some wedding ideas, I'd say, knowing Brenda hadn't even started thinking about colors or caterers, a new exercise class, a client meeting that ran over, anything to fill the gaps in my day, in my week. Ethan, trusting and kind, bought it all. He'd nod, offer to pick up dinner, never question. His unwavering patience, once a comfort, now felt like a dull, suffocating weight pressing down on me. He was too good, too simple, too safe. Brenda, meanwhile, was over the moon. She called me constantly, bubbling with every detail of her future with Beau. Wedding magazines piled on her coffee table. She talked about his family, his plans, their shared dreams. He wants to renovate an old farmhouse, she gushed one afternoon. A real project for him. Isn't that just like Beau? Each word was a tiny twist of a knife in my gut, yet I smiled. I offered advice. I played the part of the supportive friend. Beau played me expertly. He knew how to make me feel seen, desired, unique. He'd compliment my dress, my laugh, a sharp observation I'd made. "You always did have a way of cutting through the noise, Clara," he'd say, his eyes twinkling, and I'd feel a warmth spread through me. It was everything I felt I wasn't anymore with Ethan. Cherished, understood, thrilling. My work at the gallery suffered. Deadlines slipped. A new artist portfolio went unreviewed. My home life became a hurried series of lies, my mind constantly calculating, covering tracks, a low hum of anxiety always present. One afternoon, a near miss. I had just said goodbye to Beau outside the coffee shop. A quick, lingering touch of hands when I saw it. Ethan's sedan, driving slowly past on the street. My heart leaped into my throat. He didn't see us, or at least I hoped he hadn't. I froze, my body rigid, then quickly walked into a nearby bookstore pretending to browse. When I finally got home, I manufactured a story about a last-minute client meeting, the words tumbling out a little too quickly. I became a master of two lives. The dutiful wife, making dinner, listening to Ethan talk about his day, offering quiet comfort, and the reckless lover, stealing moments, texts, glances, fueled by a dangerous, intoxicating energy. The tension of it all was a constant hum under my skin, a low-grade fever. Guilt gnawed at me, especially after tender moments with Ethan. When he'd pull me close in the night, his breathing soft against my hair, I'd feel a pang of shame so sharp it almost brought tears to my eyes. But then Beau's text would come, or his voice on the phone, and his charm, his ability to make me feel like the only woman in the world, would pull me back, the guilt fading to a dull ache. I started to see Ethan's stability not as reassuring but as boring, his devotion not as loving but as needy. These thoughts, irrational and cruel, fueled my growing anger, pushing me further into Beau's volatile orbit. He was a storm. I was a leaf caught in its current, desperate to be swept away. Beau whispered sweet nothings, old promises of a future we'd once envisioned together. He implied he'd always meant to come back to me, that he'd just been lost, that I was the one, the only one. He painted a picture of a past love tragically interrupted, waiting for its inevitable return. A bitter jealousy, cold and sharp, took root. I resented Brenda for simply being Beau's official partner, for having the public claim. I was his thrilling secret, his hidden pleasure, and that felt more powerful, more real than anything Brenda possessed. The affair consumed me. I became withdrawn, agitated, my movements quicker, my eyes darting. My reflection in the mirror showed a stranger, someone with haunted eyes and a brittle smile. I barely recognized her, and I knew with a chilling certainty that this path, once chosen, would be impossible to leave. The affair grew bolder. more reckless with each passing week. We met frequently, no longer just for coffee or hurried lunches. Now it was late afternoons, sometimes even entire evenings, fabricating excuses that grew more elaborate and less plausible with each telling. We were convinced our secret was safe, wrapped in a cocoon of shared deceit. The thrill of it was intoxicating, a dangerous current pulling me further from the shore. My lies grew like kudzu, an invasive vine, weaving through every part of my life. They entangled friends, family, and even the polite inquiries of colleagues at the gallery. I rationalized it all, telling myself that Ethan was too predictable, too safe. He lived by a schedule, a routine. I deserved this wild freedom, this unpredictable chaos, this sense of being truly desired, not just appreciated. One afternoon, Brenda called, her voice edged with a slight concern. "Bo seemed a little distracted today," she said, "a bit shifty on the phone. Do you think something's wrong?" A jolt of panic shot through me, cold and sharp. Had she seen us? Did she suspect? When I relayed Brenda's worry to Bo, he merely chuckled, smoothing it away with practiced ease. "Brenda worries too much," he said, pulling me closer. "Everything's fine, Clara. Don't you worry your pretty head about it." His dismissal was so smooth, so confident, that I almost believed him. Almost. I found myself on a confusing emotional roller coaster. There would be moments with Ethan, a quiet dinner at home, his hand resting on my knee, a shared laugh over an old movie, and I'd feel a genuine warmth, a flicker of the love that had once defined us. Then, hours later, I'd be with Bo, caught in the illicit passion, the stolen touches, the whispered promises, the lines blurring until I couldn't tell where one life ended and the other began. I started spending more money on myself. New clothes, clothes I knew Bo would appreciate, subtly daring. Discreet gifts for Bo, small, expensive things he might casually mention. I justified it as my deserved pleasure, a small compensation for the elaborate dance I was performing. I was working hard, I told myself, balancing two lives. This was my reward. Ethan, ever observant, noticed the increased spending. One quiet evening, as we reviewed the household budget, he pointed to a line item. "This seems a little high, honey," he said, his voice soft, not accusatory. "Is there something new you've been buying that I don't know about?" His gaze was steady, calm, unsettling. My heart pounded. I felt cornered, exposed. Instead of answering honestly, I lashed out. "Are you checking up on me?" I snapped, my voice rising. "Don't you trust me, Ethan? Are you going to start controlling every dime I spend?" I watched his face, saw the hurt flicker in his eyes, but I didn't stop. It was a smokescreen, a deflection, and I laid it thick, pushing him away. One night, after a particularly tender moment with Ethan, a wave of crushing guilt washed over me. He had been so kind, so understanding after my outburst. He'd simply said, "I just worry about you, Clara." The honesty of his concern was a physical ache. I almost confessed everything right then, the words rising to my throat, hot and desperate. But the fear of losing my comfortable life, of seeing the disappointment in his eyes, of shattering the carefully constructed peace, stopped me. I swallowed the truth, letting it burn a hole inside me. Then Bo started talking, casually, about the future with Brenda, wedding plans, a little place of their own, maybe a renovated historic building he had his eye on. My breath hitched. A raw, possessive jealousy coiled in my stomach, cold and sharp. He was mine. He was supposed to come back to me. Desperate, I felt I had to force him to choose me, to secure his love. I needed to remind him of what we had, what we could be. I started leaving subtle reminders, bringing up old inside jokes from college, mentioning places we used to frequent, things only he and I would remember. I wanted to make him acknowledge our true, deep connection, the one I believed transcended his superficial engagement to Brenda. The constant stress of deception began to take its toll. Sleep became elusive, fragmented by restless thoughts and vivid, anxious dreams. Headaches, dull and throbbing, became a daily companion. A constant knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach, a low, persistent hum of unease. Then the formal wedding invitation arrived. A thick, cream-colored envelope, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Ethan Jensen. Inside, elegant script announced the upcoming marriage of Brenda Hayes and Bo Miller. It was a stark reminder of the ticking clock, the converging paths, the inevitable end of my borrowed time. The date was circled in red on the calendar. I stared at it, a cold dread seeping into my bones. Ethan's quiet patience, once as solid as bedrock, began to crack. He didn't yell or accuse. Instead, he'd leave things out, almost accidentally. A credit card statement, face up on the kitchen counter, with a line item highlight to it, a charge for a motel outside of town, a place I'd used once with Bo. My blood ran cold, but I pretended not to see it, letting him put it away without comment. He confronted me subtly, his voice a low hum during dinner one night. "Are you truly happy, Clara?" he asked, his eyes, usually so clear, searching my face with an unsettling intensity. "With us? With your life?" I felt the trap closing, the walls narrowing. I deflected, with the anger I now wore like a second skin. "Why wouldn't I be happy?" I snapped, pushing my plate away. "Are you always going to question me, Ethan? Always suffocating me with your concern?" I watched him flinch, saw the weary resignation settle over his face. He simply pushed his food around, saying nothing, his silence a heavy weight in the room, deepening the chasm between us. Brenda, oblivious to the deeper currents, became a confidant in her own anxieties. She called me, her voice hushed. "Bo's been distant, Clara," she said, a tremor in her voice. "Secretive. He gets these strange phone calls, and he steps away, talks in low tones. I don't know what to make of it." My heart clenched, a jolt of panic. Had he been caught, or was he seeing someone else? Feigning concern, I subtly tried to plant doubts in her mind. "Men can be complicated, Brenda Schroen," I murmured, my voice soft, almost sympathetic. "Sometimes they get cold feet, or maybe they're just not truly ready." I hoped to subtly sabotage the wedding, to create enough unease that she might call it off herself. Ethan, meanwhile, started staying late at the Amberley Hotel restoration site. He'd call, his voice tired, talking about structural issues, a new problem with a load-bearing wall. His work, once a source of quiet pride, now served as an excuse to avoid the tension, the questions, the unspoken accusations swirling at home. I noticed the mileage on his car wasn't adding up to his stories. He started paying closer attention to my car mileage, too. A small notebook appeared on his desk, inconspicuous. I saw him glance at the odometer as I pulled into the driveway one evening, then later saw him making a note. My stomach twisted. He was building a case, meticulously, quietly. But I, buoyed by the thrill of the affair and convinced of my own cleverness, became increasingly reckless. I felt invincible, certain I wouldn't get caught. My life with Bo, the clandestine meetings, the electric tension, felt too real, too vital to be exposed. "You have to choose, Bo," I demanded one afternoon, pulling him away from a conversation with one of his colleagues. My voice was low, urgent, my fingers digging into his arm. "The wedding is next month. What are we doing?" I pushed him for a real commitment, escalating our secret drama, needing a clear answer. He turned, his charm a potent weapon. He smiled, that familiar, intoxicating smile. "Clara, my sweet violet," he whispered, his thumb caressing my cheek. "We'll figure things out after the wedding. Trust me." He flattered me, made me feel special, kept me on the hook, and I, desperate, wanted to believe him. An anonymous message appeared on my social media one evening. "Secrets always come to light. Some choices are costly." My heart clenched, a cold knot of fear. Had someone seen us? Who knew? I dismissed it as a jealous prank, a bitter ex, but the seed of doubt, of exposure, was planted, growing in the dark recesses of my mind. Then, the evening I knew it was over. I found it. Or rather, Ethan did. A small burner phone hidden deep in the back of my underwear drawer, tucked inside a silk scarf. I'd thought I was so careful. He didn't confront me with it. He just left it on my bedside table, next to a printed-out string of deleted texts. Short, explicit messages from Bo, confirming his deepest fears. A cold wave washed over me, a chilling dread. He began to meticulously gather evidence, calm and deliberate, like the precision needed in his restoration work. He didn't make a sound, just the quiet rustle of papers, the soft clicks of a keyboard in his study. He was building a case, not for a court of law, but for a different kind of judgment. The final wedding preparations were underway for Brenda and Beau. The invitations had been sent, the venue booked, the date set. I saw Brenda every day, glowing, talking about flowers and seating charts. I was at a critical juncture, suspended between two lives, knowing with a sickening certainty that they would inevitably collide. The time for choices was over. The time for reckoning was beginning. If you're finding Clara's story of entangled choices compelling, stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, mocking the storm brewing inside me. I stood as a bridesmaid, the pastel fabric of my dress feeling scratchy and foreign against my skin. A forced smile was plastered on my face, aching with the effort. Brenda's joy, pure and unbridled, churned my stomach. Her laughter, her tear-filled eyes, her radiant happiness. Each moment was a fresh twist of the knife I had plunged into her life. Ethan, sharp in his dark suit, sat in the third row. I could feel his gaze on me throughout the ceremony, an unnerving stillness in his eyes. His silence was heavy, cold as a Midwest winter, a quiet pressure I could not escape. I avoided his eyes, focused on the flowers, the flickering candles, anything but the truth reflected in his unwavering stare. At the reception, the champagne flowed, a steady stream of bubbles that loosened my already fraying edges. The band played a pop song, too loud, too cheerful. I watched Beau from across the room, then saw him approach, his eyes finding mine with that familiar, dangerous spark. He held out a hand and I took it, letting him lead me onto the dance floor. We moved together too close, his fingers tracing dangerous, familiar patterns along my spine, just above the low cut of the dress. The music pulsed, the crowd swayed around us, a blur of faces and colors. I let myself drown in the moment, in his touch, in the intoxicating proximity. For a few stolen minutes, I forgot everything. Ethan, Brenda, the lies, the impending disaster. It was just us, in that bubble of illicit desire. Then, through the haze, I caught a glimpse of Brenda's face. She was standing by the head table, a glass of champagne still in her hand. Her smile, which had been so wide moments before, had frozen, her eyes wide with horrified recognition. She was watching us. Her gaze flickered between Beau's hand on my back, the way we swayed, the intimacy of our movements, and then to my face, the realization, brutal and sharp, dawned in her eyes. Beau, oblivious, or perhaps uncaring, leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. "You always were the best dancer, Violet," he whispered, his words a seductive caress, meant only for me, sealing our secret in plain sight, moments before the world exploded. Then a voice cut through the music, sharp and clear, amplified by the sudden silence that descended over the room. "Enjoying my wife, are you?" The world stopped. The music sputtered to a halt, the band leader looking confused. Every eye at the reception, 100 faces, snapped towards Beau and me, caught in the harsh glare of exposure. The laughter, the chatter, the clinking of glasses, all ceased. I turned slowly, my breath caught in my throat. Ethan stood a few feet away, his face pale, his jaw clenched. I watched his expression shift, slowly, chillingly, from shock to a cold, hard rage I had never seen before. It was deeper than anger, colder than ice. It was finality. He took a step closer, his voice dangerously soft, each word carefully articulated. "Actually, I think the term you were looking for is ex-wife." He had looked at Beau then, a curt, dismissive gesture, a slight nod of his head. "All yours now." Then he turned his back, a decisive, final movement, and walked away from me, from Beau, from the wreckage of the dance floor, from the shattered remains of our life together. A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by a torrent of murmurs, growing louder, more frantic. Brenda let out a strangled cry, her champagne glass slipping from her fingers, shattering on the polished floor. The wedding reception, once a scene of joy and celebration, descended into chaos, a maelstrom of whispers and shocked faces. I stood frozen, paralyzed by the public humiliation, the sudden, brutal collapse of my carefully constructed life, my carefully woven web of lies severed by a single sharp sentence. Beau, looking trapped and cornered, tried to mumble an excuse, something about a misunderstanding, but his charm had evaporated in the harsh, unforgiving light of truth. He looked small, pathetic, caught. I was left alone on the dance floor, the music silenced, the world staring, 100 judging eyes fixed on me. The full crushing weight of my choices descended, a physical burden pressing me down, pinning me to the floor. There was no escape. Ethan walked out of the reception, his footsteps firm and unwavering. He didn't glance back, didn't offer another word. The door swung shut behind him with a soft thud, leaving a stunned, echoing silence in the grand hall. The chaos of whispers, gasps, and breaking glass settled into a heavy, unsettling quiet. Brenda, her wedding dress a crumpled white against her trembling body, stumbled towards me. Her face was stained with tears, streaked with mascara, a mask of profound betrayal. "How could you?" she choked out, her voice raw, cracking. "My best friend? My fiancé? With you?" Her hands trembled as she gestured between me and the empty space where Beau had been. I tried to stammer apologies, explanations, but the words felt hollow, inadequate. "Brenda, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to," but they fell flat, meaningless against the profound pain and anger etched on her face. She just shook her head, a guttural sob escaping her, and turned away, letting her maid of honor lead her, stumbling, out of the room. Beau, the coward, had quickly slipped away from the reception. I saw him near a side exit, muttering vague excuses to a confused guest, then disappearing. Just like that, he was gone, leaving me to face the music alone, abandoned in the wreckage of a ruined wedding. The stares from the remaining guests felt like daggers, the whispers sharp as glass shards. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a blush of shame that started at my neck and crept up to my hairline. I fled the hall, pushing past shocked faces, my dress rustling, the sound amplified in the sudden quiet of the departure. I returned home to an empty house. The silence was deafening, pressing in on me from every corner. Ethan had been here. His side of the closet was bare, a gaping void where his shirts and suits had hung. His toothbrush was gone from the bathroom. He'd packed a bag, taking only his essentials, leaving behind everything else, including me. I called his number. It rang, then went to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. I tried Brenda, my thumb hovering over the dial button, then pushed it. Brenda's mother answered, her voice cold and hard. "Don't call here again, Clara," she said, her tone devoid of emotion. "You're dead to us." News of the public spectacle spread like wildfire through our tight-knit Midwestern community. By morning, my name was synonymous with scandal. The bakery owner, the dry cleaner, the gas station attendant, I imagined them whispering, shaking their heads. My carefully constructed reputation, once solid and unremarkable, was now irrevocably tainted. My phone rang just after lunch. It was the gallery owner, his voice clipped, formal. "Clara," he said without preamble, "we're going to have to let you go. Damage to reputation, you understand. Unforeseen circumstances." I didn't argue. I just listened, a numb acceptance washing over me. Ethan's lawyer contacted me the next day. A brief, sterile email. Divorce proceedings would begin immediately. There would be no amicable settlement, the email implied, no easy parting. He advised me to seek counsel. I found myself utterly isolated. My phone, once constantly buzzing with messages and calls, now lay silent. Friends, or those I thought were friends, turned away, their polite avoidance a colder cut than outright anger. My social circle had vanished overnight, leaving me in a stark, terrifying void. Then a text from Beau, cold, impersonal. "This is too much. I need space." Just like that, he was gone from my life again. No explanation, no remorse, just a convenient exit. The man for whom I had risked everything had simply walked away, leaving me to face the ruins alone. I spiraled into a deep, desperate depression. The public shaming, the utter annihilation of my life, the loss of everything I had taken for granted. It was a crushing weight. I barely ate, barely slept, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene at the wedding, the horror in Brenda's eyes, the cold fury in Ethan's. I was grasping the first bitter taste of paying the price, realizing the profound, immediate consequences of my thrill-seeking. The quiet, orderly life I had so carelessly dismissed, the stable home, the reliable husband, the loyal friend, they now seemed like a lost paradise, replaced by chaos and a crushing, inescapable loneliness. The divorce proceedings were brutal, a cold, calculated dismantling of my life. Ethan's lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Davies, presented airtight evidence of my infidelity. The motel receipts, the phone records, even photographs I didn't know existed. There was no room for me to maneuver, no defense. Each session chipped away another piece of my pride, another layer of my carefully constructed denial. I struggled to find legal representation. Several local lawyers, friends of friends, politely declined, citing conflicts of interest or simply a vague mention of community sentiment. I understood. No one wanted to be associated with me, with my scandal. I ended up with a young, inexperienced lawyer from out of town who looked uncomfortable every time I walked into his office. The financial hit was severe. I was facing a devastating settlement, losing most of the shared assets. The house, our savings, the investments, they were all tied up, and soon they would be Ethan's, or sold. My own small funds dwindled rapidly, eaten up by legal fees and the cost of simply existing. The thought of leaving town, of escaping the judging eyes, crossed my mind daily, a desperate urge. But shame and a strange, stubborn defiance kept me rooted in the place where my life had so spectacularly imploded. One afternoon in the grocery store, I rounded an aisle and stopped dead. Brenda. Her hair was shorter, her face thinner, but she was unmistakable. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and I saw a hardness there I'd never imagined. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. "I hope you're happy, Clara," she said, her voice low, even. "You took everything. My fiancé, my best friend. You ruined my wedding. I hope it was worth it." It was a final, scathing indictment, delivered with the quiet fury of a Midwestern woman pushed too far. She turned her cart, leaving me standing alone amidst the rows of brightly colored packages. I saw Beau around town too. Once he was laughing with another woman, her hand resting casually on his arm. They were coming out of the same coffee shop where he and I had shared so many stolen moments. He didn't see me or pretended not to. It confirmed what I already knew. His superficial nature, my foolishness in ever thinking he cared, that I was unique, special. I was just another conquest. My family offered hesitant, distant support, phone calls that ended quickly, visits that were stiff and uncomfortable. The shame of my actions hung thick in the air, creating an emotional chasm that no amount of forced pleasantries could bridge. I was an embarrassment, a stain on their quiet, respectable lives. I often passed by the empty gallery where I once worked. The windows were papered over, a for lease sign hanging in the door. A painful reminder of my lost professional identity, the creative outlet that had once given me purpose. Now there was just an echoing void. Ethan remained stoic, almost unreadable, through the entire divorce process. He attended every meeting, answered every question, his back straight, his gaze steady. His quiet strength was a stark contrast to my own emotional unraveling, my increasingly fragile state. He was a rock, unwavering, while I was crumbling into dust. I still tried to rationalize my choices, to find some twisted logic, some mitigating factor. But even to myself, the excuses rang hollow. I was forced to acknowledge my profound culpability, the simple, ugly truth of what I had done. The freedom I thought I craved had come at too high a price. Reluctantly, I started attending a support group in a neighboring town, a place far enough away that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. It was a small, anonymous space filled with other people grappling with their own mistakes. Here, I could finally voice my pain, my regret, my crushing loneliness, without the weight of judgment. The stress and emotional toll manifested physically. Chronic fatigue became my constant companion, an exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure. Anxiety attacks seized me in unexpected moments, my heart pounding, my breath catching. A profound, pervasive sadness settled deep in my bones. I sold my wedding ring, a simple band of gold, along with other valuable possessions. A small antique vase, a painting Ethan had given me. It was a symbolic shedding of my old life, a desperate attempt to cover legal fees and living expenses. Each sale felt like another piece of myself chipping away. One afternoon, I drove past the Amberley Hotel. It gleamed, fully restored, its brickwork cleaned, its windows sparkling. A painful monument to Ethan's dedication, to his vision, and to the stability, the quiet goodness I had so carelessly cast aside. The final divorce papers arrived in the mail, a thick envelope, cold and official. I signed them, my hand trembling slightly. Clara Jensen was now simply Clara, alone, with a stark and utterly uncertain future stretching out before her. I moved into a small, rented apartment on the edge of town, a stark and lonely existence compared to the comfortable home Ethan and I had shared. It had a single bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that always felt cold, no matter how high I cranked the heat. My furniture felt out of place, too big, too polished for the worn linoleum and thin walls. I took on a menial job, stocking shelves at the late-night grocery store. The work was far below my skills, a dull, repetitive task that served as a daily reminder of my fall, a tangible measure of how far I had plummeted. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting harsh shadows, and I moved among the rows of canned goods, invisible, anonymous. Life in the small town became a constant, subtle punishment. Averted gazes when I passed someone I knew on the street. Hushed whispers that stopped abruptly when I entered a room. The feeling of being an outsider looking in, an outcast in a community I had once called my own. It was a slow, quiet suffocation. Profound loneliness settled in, heavy and pervasive. The thrill I had sought, the wild freedom Beau had offered, now felt like a phantom limb, an aching emptiness where something vital should have been. It had promised so much, delivered so little, and taken everything. I tried, tentatively, to reach out to some distant acquaintance, people I hadn't wronged directly. A former colleague, a woman from my book club, but I found many doors remained closed. Phone calls weren't returned, invitations politely, vaguely declined. The silence of their rejection was as loud as any shouting. A letter arrived one day, tucked among the bills. It was from Ethan. No lawyer's letterhead, just a plain white envelope. Inside, his neat, familiar handwriting. It was simple, direct. He hoped I would find peace eventually. There was no anger, no recrimination, just a quiet resolution that cut deeper than any rage could have. I reread it, the few lines of text blurring through my tears, the quiet dignity of his words, a stark contrast to the chaos I had created. I began to truly grasp the moral cost of my actions. It wasn't just the loss of a husband, a friend, a job. It was the crushing realization that genuine happiness had been in the steady, patient love I had so carelessly discarded, not the fleeting, selfish passion I had chased. The quiet stability had been a gift, one I had only recognized once it was gone. I started a journal, a cheap, spiral-bound notebook from the grocery store. In its pages, I poured out my raw feelings, the shame, the regret, the confusion. It was an attempt to understand my destructive path, to trace the decisions that had led me here and perhaps, one day, to find a way to self-forgiveness. I sometimes saw Brenda from a distance, in the park with her dog, or at the farmer's market. She seemed stronger now, more self-possessed. Her laughter was genuine. She was moving on with her life, finding strength and independence, a quiet testament to her own healing, a testament that no longer involved me. The price paid, I realized, wasn't just about money or status. It was the irreparable damage to trust, to friendship, to my own sense of self-worth. Those wounds were deeper, more insidious than any financial loss. I found a small volunteer role at a local animal shelter, cleaning kennels, walking dogs, feeding stray cats. It was a quiet way to connect, to offer something, even if it was just simple care to creatures who didn't judge. A humble step toward rebuilding, one small, forgotten animal at a time. A moment of sober clarity came to me one afternoon, scrubbing out a kennel. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed like old architecture. They can't be patched up, restored to their former glory. They have to be acknowledged, the damage seen, and life built anew around the scars, learning to live with the altered landscape. I saw Bo again one day at the coffee shop, charming another woman with that same easy smile. He still hadn't changed, and this time I felt nothing but a quiet understanding of his superficiality. No pang of jealousy, no surge of desire. It was a small, almost imperceptible sign of my own slow healing, a quiet freedom from his influence. I made a conscious decision to rebuild my life, not on reckless thrill or stolen moments, but on quiet authenticity. Learning from my profound mistakes, one day, one truthful action at a time. The story ends with Clara, alone in her small apartment, but no longer consumed by guilt. She looks out over a quiet Midwestern street, the afternoon light fading. The heavy burden of her past is still there, a permanent shadow. But among the shadows, she sees a glimmer of hope for a more honest, if harder, future. The air is still but no longer empty. Clara sat in her small, quiet apartment, the scent of stale coffee clinging to the air. The small town hummed outside her window, a constant reminder of the life she'd once been a part of, now irrevocably outside her reach. The reckless thrill, the desperate chase for something more, had brought her here, to a folding chair in a silent room. The echoes of her past her only company. She knew she had made her bed. There was no going back, no magical undoing of the choices that had unraveled her carefully constructed world. The steady, predictable love of Ethan, the easy companionship of Brenda, those were ghosts now, haunting the empty spaces in her new, solitary existence. The quiet hum of her refrigerator, the distant rumble of a truck on the highway. These were the sounds of her present. They were stark, unforgiving, and deeply real. She looked at her hands, plain and unadorned, no longer twisting a wedding ring. The price had been paid, in full.